This second lockdown walk starts at Hinchliffe Mill at the junction of Shore Lane and the Woodhead Road, and it visits some of the ancient settlements on the western slopes of the Holme Valley. Many of these date from the Middle Ages, but more information on each of them can be found in George Redmond's book, Holmfirth Place Names and Settlements, where he looks at how the names might have originated and a little bit of history of each settlement. But before, look once more towards the east, across the river to the area covered by walk number 1, Bottoms Mill, Malcolm Wood and Bray Wood. This walk should take about an hour or hour and a half. It is circular, starting at Shore Lane, going up past Long Ing towards Booth House, then the long footpath across the fields to Yew Tree, and then back down Stubbing Clough, via Upper Stubbin, to the Woodhead Road near Yew Tree Mill. On the corner of Shore Lane, there is a modern house built in 2004, quite rightly called the Old Garage, because for most of the 20th century, on this corner stood Castle's Garage. Shore Lane derives its name from the Shore family, who at the end of the 18th and the beginning of the 19th century lived in the large house which you can see over the wall. The house is called Stubbing. The G seems optional, and it was the home of James Shaw, Gent, who lived from 1785 till 1833, and is probably one of the first of the posh houses built in the Holme Valley at the end of the 18th century. James Shaw seemed to have his fingers in most of the local pies, quarrying, coal mining, sheep farming, etc. But the Shaw family provided Holmfirth with a particularly interesting little snippet of social history. James Shaw's sister, Anne Shaw, married in December 1812 a James Stocks, who practised as a surgeon in Holmfirth at Shaley House, the house now next to the library. In December 1823, a daughter would be born to James and Anne, called Martha Stocks, and through a fortunate marriage she would become Baroness Martha Speck von Sternburg, living in some splendour in a large schloss near Leipzig. The full story of Martha's life will be told at a later time. In the meantime, back to the walk, and this panoramic view shows much of the area covered by this walk today. So, from the junction of Shore Lane and the Woodhead Road, climb up Shore Lane towards Long Ing and Booth House. As you go up Shore Lane, keep an eye open for a more recent historical memento set into the wall, a little reminder of one of the most exciting events in Holmfirth for a long time, the Tour de France, which passed through in 2014. Incidentally, the house you see at the back of the spectators is Shaley House, where Martha Stocks was born. Like all the other spectators, I stood there for more than 2 hours waiting for the bikes to appear, and they all flashed past in about 10 seconds. A rather weird spectator sport, really. Towards the top of Shore Lane, there is an old settlement known as Long Ing, Ing meaning pasture, although most of the pasture these days has been taken over by modern housing. The 1861 census describes most of the main occupiers of the properties as hand-loom weavers. Today, of course, like so many of these former cottages, they have been converted into very attractive modern houses. At the top of Shore Lane, our walk takes us onto the footpath into the recreation ground, but it's possible also to make a short diversion to the medieval settlement of Booth House, home today of Jim Robinson's Ceramics Gallery. In the recreation ground, take the green path which leads uphill towards the distant stile. Crossing the stile takes us on to the long footpath across the fields past Kiln Hill to Yew Tree. It offers panoramic vistas of the whole south and eastern side of the Holme Valley. The footpath also offers an excellent view of two places visited on the first lockdown walk, Malcolm House and then Ward Place.
Oh, it's a little funny thing. Insecty, bitey thing. Oh, what are they? You're filming them.
This beautiful footpath across the hillside takes us roughly to our halfway point, the medieval settlement of Yew Tree. Just as we enter the village, on the right, on the 1801 map, a field is described as Kiln Hill. Quite a lot of fields in the valley are called kilns. This was where corn was dried before being taken to the mill. How Yew Tree got its name is presumably obvious. There would have been, in the Middle Ages, a yew tree here, one of the most valuable woods in the medieval world, used for longbows, etc. The problem was that the foliage was poisonous to animals. So this is why we find throughout the country yew trees kept separate, usually in a churchyard. Tree seen in this image is actually from the village in Hampshire where I lived before I emigrated to Yorkshire. Similar trees can be found in churchyards all over the country. As at Long Ing, the 1861 census for Yew Tree reveals that most of the inhabitants were involved in the woolen trade in some form or other. Today, of course, again, a very different world. Whether this pump is authentic or has just been added to give atmosphere, I have no idea. Detailed look at Yew Tree is offered by History Group member Peter Burton in a contribution to the Huddersfield Exposed website. Just follow the link. Opposite Yew Tree
Nice bit.
is a stable walk. From Yew Tree, we follow Yew Tree Lane uphill till we come to a building whose description perhaps takes us by surprise given its remote location. It is a school, or was a school. The inscription over the front door tells us that it was built by public subscription in 1816. But perhaps in Victorian times it was not quite as remote as it now seems to us today, for the census returns 1851, 1861, etc. tell us that large numbers of children lived in these hillside communities. It seems to have had a rather checkered history, often struggling financially, and when the Forster Education Act came in 1870, opening board schools, it closed down. It then became a Sunday school, but with diminishing membership, the building fell into disrepair until it was repurchased and again converted into a private dwelling. At the school, we take the footpath to the left, which goes down the side of the school and brings us onto the footpath going down Stubbing Clough. But it's possible to continue the walk farther uphill to the communities of Carr Green and Flush House. The walk down Stubbing Clough is one of the most attractive parts. It's probably an ancient trackway leading from Yew Tree down to the main Woodhead Road at Hinchliffe Mill. From it, we get views back to the places we have visited: the school, Yew Tree, and in the fields, evidence perhaps again of early medieval activity. Path eventually brings us down to another ancient settlement, Upper Stubbin, an L-shaped building with a large barn. At the moment, the building is empty and in rather poor condition, but planning permission has been granted to turn it into some holiday lets, although there is no sign yet that this work has begun. Luckily, for the local historian, we know exactly when it was built, because above the old door lintel is its date, 1678. And who might the R.C. be who built this house in the 17th century? The town map of 1801 shows that the field next to Upper Stubbing was owned by a Richard Crossland, so perhaps he was the descendant of the original builder of this house, since family names were often passed down through the generations. What was the wider historical background at this time? Well, the pleasure-seeking, sex-mad monarch was Charles II, who was 48 years old in 1678. The actress Nell Gwynn was 28 that year. One of Charles's many mistresses, she would bear him 2 children. Charles would produce at least 12 illegitimate children by a variety of mistresses, but ironically his wife Catherine of Braganza failed to produce a legitimate heir to the throne. Samuel Pepys was 45 years old that year. Unfortunately, he stopped writing his diary in 1669, so we don't have his take on 1678. In 1678, the composer Purcell was 19 years old, and in that year produced his first anthem, Lord Who Can Tell. He was also appointed organist at Westminster Abbey. It would be another 200 years before England could produce a composer of the stature of Henry Purcell, when Elgar was born in the second half of the 19th century. How much of the events in far-off London would filter through to the Holme Valley at this time can only be a matter of speculation. Before leaving Upper Stubbing, take a look if you can in this outbuilding, for inside there seems to be evidence of a much earlier building in the form of 2 wooden cruck beams. Follow the footpath down past Upper Stubbing to the bottom of the hill, where you will find 2 gates, which offer a choice of a return route back down to the Woodhead Road. Passing through the White Gate on the right will take you straight down Stubbing Lane to the Woodhead Road. At the bottom, look out for what must have been once the main water supply to this part of Hinchliffe Mill, and inside the clean, fresh water still flows. Taking the left-hand gate will take you on a path which leads you between Yew Tree Mill and its dam, back up onto Yew Tree Lane, and then down once more to the Woodhead Road. The earliest buildings on the site of Yew Tree Mill date from the 1770s or the 1780s, and according to Michael Day in his book Wool and Worset, it is unique in that throughout its life it has remained in the ownership of the same family. Michael's book was published in 2013. Yew Tree Mill was still producing quality wool and cashmere cloth. So our circular walk ends back on the Woodhead Road, 200 or 300 yards along from where it began.